Welcome back to 6 and 6, where we cover 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. With that said, start your timer. We begin today in South America, where in Colombia, a rebel faction has been terrorizing the region of Catatumbo as they vie for control of the drug trade near the border of Venezuela. From BBC, quote, rival factions have been vying for control of the cocaine trade in the region, which sits near the border with Venezuela for years. The Ombudsman's office said that the latest violence involved the National Liberation Army, the largest armed group still active in Colombia, and the Revolutionary Army Armed Forces of Colombia. They signed peace treaty with the state in 2016. The Colombian government has suspended negotiations with the group after their increase in violence. Across the Pacific and Africa, where the South African government has said it is focusing on long-term stability rather than immediately trying to address their credit downrating. From Reuters, quote, the three big credit rating agencies have South Africa in sub-investment grade or quote-unquote junk status. S&P Global raised the outlook on the sovereign rating to positive in November, citing improved reform potential under the coalition government that was formed last year. Quote, our focus is how do we resolve our structural problems, involving massive structural reforms whose effect would be to lay the foundation for growth, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana told Reuters. Next, we turn to North America, where protesters in the United States Capitol were out on Saturday attempting to beckon back to the Women's March of 2016, though the crowd did not reach the historic size. From BBC, quote, the People's March, previously known as the Women's March, has taken place every year since 2017. A coalition of groups organized the movement with a stated aim of confronting Trumpism, according to its website. Smaller protests against Trump were held in New York City and on the other side of the country in Seattle. The rallies coincide with Trump's arrival to the nation's capital for a series of weekend events in the lead-up to his swearing-in ceremony on Monday. End quote. Across the Pacific in India, there is a predicted increase in the amount of sugar exports, which is creating downward pressure on commodities prices, causing it to reach a 3-year low. From Reuters reported on Sunday that New Delhi was set to allow exports in a bid to support sugar mills and prop up local prices of the sweetener, which had come under pressure in recent months. Although there had been speculation for weeks that exports would be allowed, the decision surprised some traders as this season's production is expected to fall below consumption for the first time in 8 years. End quote. This has put many different countries that rely on the sugar prices to reevaluate whether or not it will be a productive crop this year for them as well. Next, we go to the South in Australia, where a mother of a small child has been accused of poisoning her child in order to gain attention and donations online. From BBC, quote, police began investigating on the 15th of October when the baby was brought into a hospital experiencing, quote, severe emotional and physical distress and harm. Tests for an unauthorized medicines returned a positive result later in January, they said. However, Insep Dalton said the child is now safe and doing well. The woman raised nearly 60,000 Australian dollars, or roughly 30,000 pounds, or $37,000 through GoFundMe donations, which the site is attempting to repay, Department Insep Dalton said. End quote. And meanwhile, in Europe, where the French President Macron has called for a more independent stance for European nations regarding where they buy their various types of armaments. This comes on the back of multiple trade deals not necessarily going in the favor of the French government, who also has a strong arm sector, but others have chose to go to the United States. From Reuters, quote, speaking minutes before the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump, who has complained that Europeans do not pay enough for their defense, Macron said the continent should spend more. Macron said Europeans should also allow simplifying the European defense industry. Europe has 47 different industrial platforms for its Navy industry, while the U.S. only has 6, he said. He called for a more joint European weapons development plan, and even without French companies in the lead, adding, quote, we won't always be the European champions, but at least we'll be sure the European champions have a global reach, end quote. And if you want to check out any of today's articles, you can find all the links in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, where I post the links to all the videos that come out here onto the YouTube channel so you can click directly to them. And remember, on the RSS feed, you can download everything so you can listen to it during your commute if you don't necessarily have cell coverage the entire way. And with all of that, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.